And after the meeting, I'll have this recording on the stream, so that it should be available afterwards. And if you wanted to hang out afterwards, I'm happy to ask questions. Just take that chat and put your live reactions in there. I apologize. I'm not trying to ignore anybody. It's just like, as I'm mirror the whole screen, I won't be able to see the chat and the thing at the same time. But yes, please keep those comments coming. Any questions you might have. I'm all in to help in any way that I can. But let's do this thing. I think it's going to work. Maybe. I'm going to try to mirror my screen. Whew. All right. Share my PowerPoint. Let's go. I'm going to share my desktop window. Share my entire screen. That's the one. All right, teams. We should be able to see my status here for OK, fine. And now I'm going to put this up in the background. Can everybody see what looks to be the presentation screen here? If you could just put a thumbs up or a yes in the chat box, just so I can make sure we are here. See it. It should say Global EdTech Academy, fully gamified classroom, way beyond one-day Jeopardy, Sunday, 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Can you see that here? Just in that chat feature. Just making sure. New messages. Yes. Hi, John. Awesome. God bless you guys. Thank you. Please laugh at my jokes. I am so sorry that I will not be able to see your smiling faces, but I will do a click through, and hopefully we'll all be able to learn together. I will gladly take comments and questions there in the chat. So thank you. My name is John, and I hate it when people waste my time and my money. So as an educator and as an instructional coach and as a classroom teacher, author, presenter, I'm fired up to change the world, and I want to help you do the same thing. Thank you to Microsoft for hosting today. And thank you to you all for dialing in today as well. Today we're going to dial in and talk about a fully gamified classroom from start to finish, whether you teach littles, middles, high school, or adult learners. The big secret about all this stuff is we're not really teaching content. We're using our content to teach kids. And so I'm here to talk about how we deliver our pedagogy in a way that's fun and exciting, because we've all done one-day Jeopardy. One-day Jeopardy feels like a great way to kind of break from the norm and get the kids out of the funk. The problem is, very quickly when you do one-day Jeopardy, if your class is anything like mine, we figure out about 10 minutes into it, the kids stopped caring because they know that only a certain number of kids will ever get the answers right. And then you have to do that thing where you say, no one's allowed to talk twice before anybody talks once. And it shuts the whole thing down because there's a group that's going to get every question right, and there's groups that's not going to get every question right. So you might have put 2 hours into your Jeopardy review game creating it, but the average kid might only answer one question a day. And that's not what we're looking at. So I wanted to talk about ways to get fun and excitement into our classrooms. There's a great Finnish saying, which I love, and I quote my book, which is called, they say that the things you learn without joy, you will forget easily. And I'm going to show you examples of things that are happy and exciting and fun, not just on a one-day Jeopardy, but every single day of my entire class year, from the first day with our syllabus to the last day with our final exams. These are pictures of real kids in my real classrooms. Hopefully you can see their smiling faces. And you can see that we're working together, we're collaborating, we're competing, and we're challenging one another. And that's true for students of all ages. If I can get high school kids to get excited about playing with Legos, how much more so are your middle school students going to get excited? Here in this laughing picture here, I have Chase. He's a music theater kid. And I have Eddie. Eddie is about to be drafted for Major League Baseball's top 200 baseball players in the country. Outside of my class, they would not have had any occasion to act or interact with one another. But I see this reaction here. I see this kindness. I see this empathy. I see this joy, this vulnerability, and picture after picture after picture. And of course, I take the pictures that I'm happiest about and put about my presentations. But this is every day in my classes. I just want you to see these kids who are looking at one another, smiling with one another, laughing with one another, learning with one another, regardless of race or age or gender or sexuality. That's what we want to see. I have here a nice GIF on the bottom corner where you can see the energy in a class just to find out that they beat the other class section, right? The fifth period against the third period. How do we have our classes feel like a sporting event? And on those days where our classes really are that escape from, Lord knows what kids are going through at home, whether that's poverty or self-harm, whether that's suicidal ideation or COVID or loss of family or loss of loved ones or questions of their own sexuality or their own faith. How do we get kids for a moment to laugh and to breathe and to be excited? So when they come in the classroom, it becomes escape from all that crazy and they can't wait to come back next. So I'm talking a lot of examples about my classroom, and all these templates are available on my websites afterwards. So I do want to offer them up gladly, freely to everyone who wants at EDrenalineRush.com. So talking about having some fun, I lead trainings like this all over the US. And when I lead these trainings, I'll typically do it in a face-to-face environment. You may have seen one that happened about, I want to say about a year ago, last March. I posted up a video of me leading a training where I took a worksheet, cut it into strips, and put them in plastic Easter eggs. I then took those plastic Easter eggs and put them in a bucket, and teachers kind of came up for their groups, took the egg back to their desk group, and tried to solve the math problems hidden inside. It was all numbered. So how many problems could you solve over the course of, let's say, 10 minutes? I took that video, posted up online, didn't think much about it. The very next day, that video had 10,000 views overnight. And I was like, uh-oh, we have something here. So I called it the hashtag egg-challenge. And I said, can you do this with your classroom? I posted the instruction on my website. And I started to see teachers all over the planet sharing ways that their students of all ages were starting to engage. Because these plastic Easter eggs are available at just about every store in the world for pennies on the dollar in the time of the spring. And if you're not in a Christian school, you don't feel comfortable with plastic Easter eggs, you can use envelopes, you can use balled up pieces of paper. I saw a science class do like little beakers of science with like little papers shoved inside of them. What happened here is this viral phenomenon. In a month, this video had 75,000 views. It trended through the United States. There was people who were putting egg-challenge videos or photos from their classrooms in 40 out of 50 US states. It wound up spreading through 6 provinces in Canada and to 12 countries throughout the world, in France and Australia. And it was just so humbling to see this energy, this universal excitement, because there's no achievement gap for fun. Students of all ages, of all genders, of all races, of all sexualities love playing. And you can see the pictures of these people here. These are older kids. I have kids outside in uniforms. I have kids in parochial schools. I have kids in private schools. I have kids in charter schools, Catholic schools, Black students, white students, just laughing and having fun together. And it's just because we took a simple presentation and took what otherwise would be a traditional classroom activity and presented it with a bit of a twist. And that idea of that little bit of a twist for a simple one-day activity, could we take that same energy and harness it every single day in our classrooms? So that's the purpose of today's conversation. So I'm going to give everybody here a test. You may not have thought you're getting tested in a free PD, but here's what it looks like. And I borrowed this from an engineer. His name is Mark Rober. I saw it on a TED Talk, and I thought it was brilliant. He said, I'm going to give you this test. I want you to push button 3 for 5 seconds and button 6 for 1 second. I'm sure some people are reaching to their screens now and touching the screen, trying to push the buttons. It's an 86-page test, and you can't get to the second page or the third page or the fourth page until you get a perfect score on the first page. Now I'm going to ask you, if this is our test, how much would I have to pay you to take this test? And he says, probably most people would not be interested. What if I took that test and called it a game? Not unlike the egg dash challenge. It's the same thing, but we just try to make a game out of it. Okay, how much can you get done? And like the egg dash challenge, taking a familiar thing and presenting it in a fun way, what if we took this game now and turned it on its side? Or maybe cut it into strips, or posted it underneath a desk where students had to come in and then discover the answers like an escape room, right? Now they have to find their way through it and still push those buttons to get to page 2, page 3, page 4, and they have to get 100% on page 1 before they get to page 2. So what if we took those buttons and said, you know what? Maybe they're too easy too. Maybe we can rearrange the configuration of those buttons. Maybe we'll give them a little bit of a story or a little bit of jazzed up presentation themselves, a new coat of paint. And we take what was a written prompt here with verbal instructions, and we replaced it now with visual instructions, asking that same question. How much would I have to pay you to take this test? Or maybe more directly, how much would you pay me to take this test? Because video games are designed for this exact purpose. Whether you're in Nigeria or Nebraska, whether you're in Toronto, or whether you're in Topeka, Kansas, the game comes right out of the box, and there are instructions which you can follow or not follow. But as you play, you learn through your failure, and you have the chance to try and try and try again. And students all over the world get really, really excited about this idea of playing for fun. And they like it when the game is hard, but not too hard. But they hate it when the game is easy. In fact, I want to talk about this in a moment, because what video games do is they offer for us an experience where it's okay to fail. We keep hearing about Carol Dweck and mindset and how we can create classrooms where we normalize the failure process. Video games offer the opportunity for us to get specific, actionable feedback right there on the spot, expediently. So if you play the video game and you run Mario from left to right, if he falls down a pit, you don't have to wait 3 weeks to get feedback to say you died. Instead, your man falls down the hole and they get another life and says, you want to try again? That's very different than a traditional classroom where we collect all of those essays or all those papers from students, and then we have to take them home in our car and wait till that weekend and have that big pile. And we sort of hate that grading process where we're having a glass of wine or maybe 2 glasses of wine or a bottle of wine because the kids were at the bottom of the pile making the same mistakes that the kid at the top of the pile did, but you still have new lessons to plan. And oh my God, I'm ready to tap out. I'm ready to give up before I even get into it. So how can we make our classes more game-like, that there's specific actionable feedback right there on the fly? Because that's what good games do. I have a pop quiz for you in a second, but lest we think that it's just about video games, because it's not. If you don't play video games, you don't have to play video games. This is old school, way, way back before the 1980s. In fact, it comes to us from this earliest ideas of Socrates and Plato. This book is called Leisure, the Basis of Culture. It's by an amazing scholar. I'm Catholic, and he's a Catholic scholar of St. Thomas Aquinas. His name is Joseph Pieper. But in his book, Leisure, the Basis of Culture, Pieper argues that leisure is the very foundation of why we have a society. It's the thing we fight our wars for. But interestingly, he says that leisure in Greek is the word schole, and in Latin, the word scala, the English word school. Literally, the word we use to designate the place where we educate and teach kids is derived from the word which means leisure. In other words, this is the thing that we get to do. We don't have to do it. We choose to do it. We want to do it. We lean into it. But somewhere along the way, our schools stopped being places of scholarship and started to become sweatshops. And maybe that's in the early 1900s with this idea of this industrial revolution. The same time we started grading meat, we started grading children. And that seems like it lost its purpose because our students became much like cogs in a wheel, feeling like they were roboticized and forgotten for who they were supposed to be and losing that purpose. So I want to talk about what games do and how our classrooms then could tap into that same energy. In a great book called The Game Believes in You, USA Today National K-12 education reporter Greg Topo was a reporter for USA Today about 20 years. He then moved on to being a managing editor inside higher ed. He wrote this book called The Game Believes in You, How Digital Play Can Make Our Kids Smarter. And he says, you know, games are precision engineered feedback machines. If you play a piano and you play the wrong note, you have the chance to play it again. In fact, the machine is infinitely patient and infinitely stupid. It won't yell at you for playing the wrong note. You'll just hear it that it was wrong and you have the chance to play it again and play it again and play it again. And he says that for those who were born before the technology was created, we call it a technology. But for those who were born after the technology was created, it's just a way of life. For our students, growing up in a video game generation was a way of life. Just like when we all grew up, the piano wasn't a technology, it was just an instrument or a tool. But when they design video games, they have a sweet spot they intend for a rate of failure. They want you to fail a certain amount of times because that's what makes it fun. If it's too easy, you wouldn't play the game. If it's too hard, you take your controller and throw it across the room. So I wanted to ask this question. We can use the chat feature to give our feedback. What do we think the intended rate of failure for old school video game design difficulty is? If 0% failure is the first time you play it, everyone in the world is going to beat that game. And 100% of the time failure is every time you play it, everyone will fail that game. So on a scale of 0 to 100% failure rate, again, if 0% failure is first time you play it, everyone passes. And then 100% failure is first time you play it, everyone fails. Go ahead and write your answers there in the chat. I'm going to actually flip the screen off. I'll see your answers and I'll dial back into the chat. Let's take a look. Depends on the game. That's a good question. Yeah, that definitely does depend on the game for sure. 55%, 25%, 30%, 30, 40, 40%. Cheryl says 70%. Crystal says 60%. Jen says 48. It's like Price is Right. You wanted to beat him, but only by 1 or 2. Susan says 50%. I like it here. Jeff joined the meeting. Welcome to the party, Jeff. Heather says 40%. It looks like we're trending about the 50% rate. I want to get the actual retail price without going over. Dave says 50%. Uh-oh, here we go. Karen says, apart from my brother's job for Activision and Warner Brothers, they estimate how long it takes to get the game and adjust specifics after testing. Here we go. So she's given an actual retail price. Alicia, the question was, when they design video games, what percentage of the time that you play it do they want you to fail? If 100% time is when you play it, you're guaranteed to die on the first time through, and 0% time is if you're going to play it, guaranteed to pass. So Karen says that from her expert inside information here at Activision, now for Warner Brothers, it's about a 60% rate. And that's one of the higher ones I've seen here on this list. In fact, Crystal said a 60%. Cheryl said 70%. Susan said 50. Alicia, thank me for the question. Sissy was a guess. No, not from him, direct. Okay, I'm going to give you guys the real answers here, and I appreciate you taking part of the conversation there. I am going to show you my screen again because it's just more exciting when we reveal it here. Actual retail price without going over, believe it or not, 80% failure rate. When they design a video game, they want you to fail 80% of the time when you first play it. How crazy is that, right? Think about it, if, as a classroom teacher, if I built a test and 4 out of 5 of the kids in my classroom failed that test, and I said, pat on the back, John, I've done good, I would be out of a job on Monday. I'd be working at Starbucks. But for kids and for games, there's something about that failure rate that's addictive, that we're, oh, so close, but I want to try again. So how can we capture that failure to make it fun in our classrooms? Unless we think that today's students are too mollycoddled or too bubble wrapped to be able to handle that failure, I want to point out, when they go home, they play Fortnite, they play Apex Legends, they play Mario Kart, they play Minecraft for hours. This is the rate on average that they're failing at home, more than 1 out of 2 times when they design these games, because when we go back to old school video games, they were designed to steal your quarters, right? They were designed to hook you into wanting to play and getting you into that flow state where you're really excited to try and try again. I want to talk about that flow state very quickly, which is the science behind why fun and games work, before we jump into some examples from classroom. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who is a researcher who talks about positive psychology and the flow state, he says, if the game is too easy here, the skill level then is really, really high, the student will feel relaxed when they play it. If the game is too hard and the student is underqualified, then that student starts to feel anxious. But if you can design a video game or a board game or a sport or a club or an activity that the skill level is ramping up just as much as the challenge level is ramping up, that's when we hit that flow state. That's that fully immersed feeling of that energized focus, full involvement, and just enjoyment, fun. You lose track of time. Like, time flies when you're having fun. If you've ever played your own games at your own house, you ever looked at the clock and said, oh my God, it's 3 hours later. How did that happen? Or your kids in your own house, Mom, just one more man, just one more level, just one more guy until the next save point. You forget to eat, you forget to sleep, you get to use the bathroom. Like, you just go and you're in that zone, and before you know it, it's 3, 4, 5, 7 hours later. That's what we want to replicate in the classroom. So if we can design our habit-forming products in the classroom to hook that flow state as fast as we can, the more and more we hit those positive neurons, which is why I call my book EDrenaline Rush, we get students excited to want to come back and do the same thing. In another book, real quick, about education, if you read one book about education, make it Daniel Pink's book, Drive. It is an amazing book about the surprising truth about what motivates us. If you read 2 books about education, read EDrenaline Rush by John Meehan. I promise it'll be worth your time. But in Pink's book, he says people don't move for dangling carrots and sticks. They don't move because you've told them there's a prize at the end of the tunnel. Rather, they move because they seek autonomy, they desire mastery, and they crave purpose. And traditional homework in traditional schools doesn't work with autonomy or mastery or purpose. In fact, students learned how to play the game of school a long time ago, and I'm going to give you an immediate example. If you give homework in school every day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you give that homework, and unless you're grading that homework, kids don't do that homework. So you do what every teacher does. You double down, and now you start making that homework worth more points. 10 points, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Kids come in, all have the homework completed, don't know if they actually did it or just took a picture and sent it on the group chat. There's no autonomy there. Likewise, if a child is failing your class, simply telling that child to do more homework doesn't mean that they're going to practice perfectly. They're just going to do bad practice. So they're mastering something, but they're not necessarily mastering the right something. At the same time, if you have a child who has 100% in your class, what is the purpose of giving them homework? To bury them, to pull them down? What happens when the students learn how to game the school system is for 10 days in a row, they get their 10 points for homework that they probably copied from their friends. Then they come in every second Friday for that unit test, and you give them the big unit test, and because they have no idea what they've learned, they get like a 60% on that test. We tell them, Billy, you should just study a little harder. You do great on your homework, but you're not a good test taker. I'll give you 100 points for each of the total homeworks, so 10 points for each night for 10 days, total of 100 points. And your test grade will be worth 60 points. So we'll take 100, we'll take 60, we'll even them out and say you get a B- for Unit 1. I hope you learned something. Study harder next time, Billy. And we're moving on to Unit 2. But that's a false positive because the child never actually learned anything in your classroom. They learned how to copy, they learned how to game the system. If we don't change the game for our students, they will figure out how to change the game for us. So I talk about autonomy, talk about mastery, and talk about purpose. And I want to take today's presentation in 3 parts when I talk about game-based learning that's way beyond Jeopardy. I'm not talking about games for review. I'm talking about games for direct instruction, that you can become your own person and you can pick your way to how do you learn and then demonstrate your learning for mastery and purpose. And we'll give examples of each. So Talking about autonomy, if you've ever played Mario, I see some. I imagine I would see some smiling faces here because everyone has their favorite Mario character. Yeah, wahoo! Right, you're a Mario guy, or wow, wow, I'm a Luigi, Waluigi. And if you don't play Mario, I'll pray for you. But if you've maybe played Monopoly, you probably have your favorite piece. You're the dog, or you're the hat, or you're the iron, or you're the battleship, and you're really upset when someone else sits down to that board and takes your piece, right? Because that piece represents you in the game. It's the first small way to say, even though all these pieces are functionally indifferent from one another, this represents me and I've made the choice to play in my way. And there's something about the idea of choice and volition when we play games, because we reserve the right at any time to say, hey, this is no longer fun. I don't like the way that you're playing. I no longer wish to play. Could we get more autonomy in our classroom starting from our first day of class? So what I do in my American literature class is I say, all right, guys, I have 400 years of content to cover from way back in the Scarlet Letter in the 1600s, all the way through the writings of the 1950s and 1960s and social justice arguments. And there's so much to learn and discover about the American dream. Well, what if my brain was able to take each of these units and make it a subchapter of a much larger story? And the way that we played each story would be slightly different. So every 3 weeks, we're working on a different skill. But all year long, there's a big old narrative because our brain responds really well to story with this idea of, okay, we're chasing for this American dream. It's almost like a football. Who has the ball? Who's passing the ball? Who fumbled the ball? Who's losing the ball? Who's stealing the ball, right? And in each unit, then, we can trace this thread of the American dream and become avatars or players in this game where we take that ball and help these people carry it to try to get that dream from point A to point B, to get it across that finish line, the goal line. Thankfully for me, because I'm a humanities teacher, it's really easy because the stories that I'm borrowing the dream from come from American literature, whether it's Huckleberry Finn or Ernest Hemingway or the Scarlet Letter. But if you teach a science or a math class, that same idea of making your students a story in their year-long unit or their year-long chase for something can be very powerful to start sparking students' imaginations. An example from a science class, maybe your first unit, you learn about space. And just like the very basics of gases and planets and how planet things are formed. But then for unit 2, you crash land on one of those planets and find out the basics of biology, about learning about life. Then for unit 3, you learn a little bit about physics, sort of how to blast off back into the interstellar atmosphere and the type of things that we need to make the science behind making a planet launch possible. So through that, there's a whole year-long story that helps students start to tune in and say, oh, I get it. I'm a player in this year-long chase for the American dream, or this year-long exploration of space, or this year-long time traveler study of American history, whatever it winds up being. Now, each unit will play slightly different, but it's a year-long story where I'm chasing for this big thing, this goal. And then there's a purpose to it, which is really, really important. And how students choose to play feels much more like a game. And we'll give some examples here from the first day of class. So because they're chasing for the American dream in my class all year long, on day 1, I'm like, well, then let's get our time machines ready, guys, because we have to blast off into space. So I create a PowerPoint presentation that looks just like this. Each of these different slides you see here is a different slide on the PowerPoint. I'll then take those slides and print them out and put them in clear plastic sleeves around the classroom. Students are divided into small teams of 4 or 5 students, and then individually, students have to come up on that to the front of the board, grab one of these look for items, take it back to their desk group, and solve whatever piece of the puzzle is there waiting for them in order to collect the jetpack or the time capsule or the warp drive or the med kit. Because on that first day of class, I have a whole bunch of stuff I need to do with my students. Maybe I need them to fill out graphic organizers about the type of learner they are, or do a short flip grid where they give me a quick video about what their summer was like. Maybe they sign up for text alerts, or they sign up for the course profile. Maybe they take an online form with Microsoft Forms where they do a survey about who they are. But here's the secret. I don't care whether they sign up for text alerts before they make their flip grid. By the end of the class, every student will have had to do all of those things. And if I say, all right, guys, I got 9 or 10 stations, we got about 90 minutes. With your team, pick whatever station you want to start with. When you think you have it right, call me over. If you're right, I'll cross it off the list and you've added that item to your inventory and you can keep moving. But if you're wrong, you keep working on that, just like a video game would. Now, very quickly, there's autonomy, there's mastery, and there's purpose. And as students are blasting through the year, they're realizing, oh, I'm not actually teaching content. I'm teaching you as a person. I want to know who you are as a person. And the way that you choose to play directly affects your homework, the shape, the structure, the trajectory of this class. And we get to learn them that much easier and that much quicker. I'm going to give some examples immediately. As students are then filling out a graphic organizer on that first day of class, they would each be given a sheet of paper that looks something like this. They have no idea how to fill it out. But in order to fill it out, when they move to each of the stations, it will give them direct instructions about how to use each of the pieces of this puzzle. So maybe on the one that looks like a book over here, that's their captain's log, and they have to write down their goal for the year, 2 to 3 sentences, and I can scale this up or scale this down as I need the difficulty to be for my classes. When I think they all have it, they all meet together, they call me over, it's a quick spot check, yep, you're good, you're moving on. I don't care whether they write their goals down before they sign up for their flip grids, their text alerts, but by the end, every student has done every piece of the puzzle, right? Maybe at another station yet, they take a quick personality profile and they let me know their learner style. I know learner styles can be overstated and overrated, but it's just an understanding of who they are as a learner. It helps me get a vibe on how I can better teach them individually. Maybe at a third station or a fourth station yet here, they have to rank and rate themselves as if they were creating a character in a video game. But the secret is, I'm looking for reading, writing, speaking, presenting skills, social technology, and gaming skills. You're only allowed to give yourself one score of 6, one score of 5, one of 4, one of 3, one of 2, one of 1. Which one would you give yourself the most points in? How much more deeply do I know each child when they fill out a hex graph here on the left-hand side? And they've, quote, created a character to come play my game all year. So I know, I might have 4 or 5 students who are great writers, but 3 or 4 students are big gamers. 2 or 3 students are great speakers, helping me to figure out how to mix up my teams every couple of weeks as we move into those new units, because these skills will follow them through the year. So first day, my students move through all these modular stations, which is great. Then in the background, I made a PowerPoint and I just embedded a timer, and it says, all right, red team versus gray team versus blue team. I have my Elton John Rocket Men as the green team. They're blasting off through history. They're trying to find their way through all these modules. I'm just checking off every one of the things as students are completing it. And I get a high level look at, okay, it looks like the group is getting some work done. If a group is falling behind, when I check on that group individually, they can see the scoreboard and realize they're falling behind and sense that feet to the fire, so they'll start to dial it up. But if I check in on another group and they're killing it, doing a great job, here my gray group, my secret agents, they're doing too good of a job, I can ask more harder clarifying questions there. And that guarantees that that group will slow down a little bit, which keeps the game close and makes the game fun. Much like a game of Mario Kart or Monopoly. It's not fun when it's a dead runaway, but it's fun when you get those hidden items, those power-ups, those game twists that keep everybody in the game together. So I might ask more clarifying questions to my gray group, so I can gauge it and say, hey, I have about an hour left. This group should be about halfway done. If they're moving faster than that, I can slow them down like an accordion. If they're moving slower than that, I can give them that attaboy or that attagirl, or that which worked was for a group as an in-class project now becomes individual homework with all of those outstanding stations still yet to be done at the end of our first day or the second day of class. That's fair, that's equitable, talk about autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And now there's a reason to say, hey, we really got to put the rubber to the road here, otherwise we're going to fall behind on our syllabus. And then that first or the second day, there's that energy. I get to know the students, I get to meet with them, I get to learn their player styles, I get to see who they are, and we can blast off into the next part of our learning for the year. Out of Doug Limov's book, Teach Like a Champion, he says the reward for correct answers will always be harder questions. So you're never done learning. And when you overcome a challenge, you start looking forward to the next. How powerful is that? In a classroom, it's not work until I give you a piece of candy or work until you get the gold star on the page, but rather, much like a video game, the next level will always be harder than the next and the next and the next and the next. So if you beat level 1, you don't get punished with playing level 2. You get rewarded with the chance to play level 2. But level 2 would be much, much harder. So my enrichment activities, I always have a bag of Legos or another enrichment activity ready to go in the background. And this works for any course or any content area. If a group finishes early on that syllabus, for example, or an activity that's much like that syllabus, I'll give them a bag of Legos and I'll say, can you build for me the concept we're currently studying in class? Can you represent for me visually what we're reading about? And it's an English class, so we read like The Great Gatsby as an example here. And then they make a PowerPoint with pictures of everything that they are building, including the annotations there on the right-hand side to explain why they are building it the way that they've chose to build it. If you're playing with Legos, you're looking for the green brick, not the blue brick. It has to be the green, has to be the green, has to be the green. And when you're setting that up, you're metacognating. You know why you did what you did. Asking students to present that visually here rewards them for the work that they are doing at home. But that's a big challenge. This is not easy. It's, can you make a 3D representation of the work that you're learning? Can you build for me what photosynthesis looks like, but do it out of Kifa blocks, or you do it out of Legos? How much more engaged and excited, because the student feels that this is an award or a reward rather than a punishment, like, oh, today for class we have to do X. Another one I love using is story cubes. Rory story cubes are available on the internet. They'll cost you like $10 for a set of 9 cubes. It looks like emoji on dice. You can see students here playing together. I'll pass out those dice in a set, and I'll say, all right, team, can you explain to me the concept that we have been learning in class using these dice? And they roll the dice at random, and then they have to explain how, I don't know, there's a fish in The Great Gatsby. Well, there are no fish in The Great Gatsby. So maybe they'll have to say something like, well, Gatsby was acting fishy in chapter 2 when ... And they start to make new meaning and make new metaphors. That's really, really strong, really, really empowering. They'll see a cell phone. There's no cell phones in The Great Gatsby. They'll say, well, he's the type of person who would be image obsessed, like as if he had a social media profile, how he would represent himself. And it's great because they're collaborating and they're competing. And it's group 1 versus 2 versus 3 versus 4. And what I can do is pass out cubes to each team, and I'll say, okay, you guys have the orange cubes, another one has the blue cubes or the Batman cubes or the Star Wars cubes. Or better yet, the team that won yesterday gets to assign which group uses which set of cubes. It's a little bit of an advantage or a little bit of a disadvantage that says, look, now you have to work that much harder or not that much harder based on the work that you're doing. Again, intrinsic rewards for autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And it's very, very difficult. It could take 10, 15 minutes to use every one of those cubes to explain it. But once you finish the orange set, can you try it with the Batman set? Can you try it with the Scooby-Doo set? Students find themselves really, really engaged because they're doing very high-level taxonomy work because it's presented to them as if it's a challenge and a choice. Talking about choice and challenge, I teach the Scarlet Letter, and this is a game I've developed for any pedagogies. You can find it on my website. I call it Text Quest. This day and age, kids are understanding immediately the idea of Dungeons and Dragons. You can actually look at this picture here, and it looks like a Dungeons and Dragons type game. I think Stranger Things had a lot to do with making kids excited about that. So I was like, well, what if I presented a novel study unit or a history study unit or a cultural study unit as if it was a game of Dungeons and Dragons? You walk into the woods and you meet a stranger. Do you go left? Do you go right? Do you go center, right? So I'll present to them a slide on the first moment when they come into class, play some spooky music as they walk in the door. And we'll be doing this for, a whole 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whatever the unit is. And I'll recap what they were supposed to have read last night. You find yourself in an unfamiliar territory. Here we are in Puritan Boston in 1642. There's a woman on the scaffold. She has a baby, but she's not saying who the father of that baby is. And even more scandalous, she's married. So what are we going to do? I want you to talk to your teammates to determine the best course of action. Again, autonomy, right? There's a sense of metacognition here. Yes, I have spoiled what happened in the book, but the truth is, if I gave a gotcha test, there's no way to know that the kids actually read the book to pass that gotcha test. They could have just cliff noted their way through it. This forces them to interact with the text and make some decisions inspired by what they have read and what they've communicated with their teammates. So again, that autonomy. Do you do the easy thing, the medium thing, or the hard thing? If they want to do the easy thing, then let's join in that conversation. She's a sinner. She deserves to be bullied, to be shamed, to be blamed, to be called out for her mistakes. If they want to do the medium thing, well, let's not say anything. Things can get messy. Let's just lay low and hold our tongues. Or do you want to do the hard thing? Speak out against this as an injustice because this is an outrage. This is a person's personal life, and it's none of our business as a team. I'll give them 2 to 3 minutes to strategize as a team. Then I'll ask a representative from each of these competing teams to come onto the board and say what they would want to say. We can either have a debate about why they're saying what they're saying, or I'll have them scan a QR code here, and that QR code will take them to a Microsoft form where then they have to fill out like an online survey about, hey, why did you say what you said for the easy thing or the medium thing or the hard thing? But because the form is built by me, I'm the game master, right? I'll say use text evidence to back up what you said, easy thing, medium thing, or hard thing. If they pick the easy thing, well, it should be pretty easy to defend that as a team, right? Okay, so scan the easy thing, then back to your desk group you go. Can you put in 400 to 500 characters about why you said what you said? If you pick the medium thing, can you scan that code and put in maybe 200 to 300 characters? I can make that question a little easier because they're being asked to do a much harder look for. And if they choose to do the hardest thing, maybe they only need 100 or 200 characters worth in order to pass that form. Just like when you fill out a credit card form online and it says it needs your CCV code or it won't let you through it, that exact match is the thing a student group needs to enter before they move through it. So then I can go back afterwards and look at all their numbers in the spreadsheet. And that really, really is helpful because I can start to see why students are thinking what they're thinking. Very high level, right? Very metacognitive, rather than just what was the man's name on page 7. They're bringing text evidence to bear their answers out. We'll warm up like that. And then afterwards, as groups have done their 5 or 10 minutes worth of warm up, They'll now break into the next activity, which we'll do for the duration of the period, let's say 40 minutes or thereabouts. I have here a series of 7 different types of annotation. They can build with Legos, they can play with story cubes, they can do sketchnoting, they can do graphic organizers, they can meet with me as the teacher. I don't care which one they pick, but maybe let's say yesterday's winners get first crack of the bat. Which one do you want to pick? Oh, we want to play with the Legos today. Okay. I want you to build everything we read last night out of Legos and start making that PowerPoint. Go, go, go. Take those pictures, get those notes in. You got 40 minutes, build as much as you can. You're never allowed to go back to the Lego station though. So over the course of the 7-day unit, every group will have cycled through all 7 different annotation styles. Some of the annotations will be much, much harder. But the beauty of this is it's still going to practice that skill. Is there close reading? Are they using text evidence? Are they bringing in things to back up why they said what they said? And over the course of the groups, they cycle through each of these 7 different annotations, which I otherwise would have had to do on a daily activity. Okay, today everyone's playing with Legos, and now we just turn it into a competition. Each of the teams are building things, whether it's with Legos or with sketch notes or with story or with Flipgrid. And then the beauty of it is at the end of the class, I have all the turned in deliverables from 4 teams that'll compete. I'll say, all right, guys, let's find out tomorrow who won. We start the next class off with, that was really close. But like, whose line is it anyway? The games are made up and the points don't matter. And I'm in charge of the game. And I can look at first, second, third, fourth. And I'd say, based on the strength of these, here's what the first place one looked like. Or here's what the second place looked like. Or here's the third. Or here's the fourth. And what I'm finding is when you focus on learning, grades come as a natural consequence. If you focus on grades, learning suffers because all students care about is, did I get the A? The beauty of this team-based competition is, I don't know, I'm comparing apples to oranges. Is the sketch note better than the story cube? Is the annotation better than the graphic organizer? I can't really tell you. On the first day, however, I can show that work product and say, here's what got the gold medal yesterday. If you guys want to beat that gold medal product, well, that's what was the high water mark yesterday. So that rising tide will lift all ships through the course of the unit. And then each subsequent unit, each subsequent challenge gets that much harder. And student groups have to lean in and do that much more work, or they find themselves falling behind again and again. Likewise, I can give the group the old attaboy or attagirl privately and say, hey, you guys picked a really hard station today. If you can build 5 or 6 scenes out of the Legos, maybe that'll put you in #1 contenders. And then they start to feel that sense of mastery because they kept hearing, I can do it, versus I can't. And I reserve the right at any time to reward or award the students for the great work they're doing. That autonomy is so, so critical. But sometimes you're in classes that challenge students to talk about things that are heavy, that may not lend themselves to a game. Example, if you teach the Holocaust or if you teach about slavery, you should not make a game or an escape room out of helping people escape from something that was very real and traumatic. You can't trivialize someone's trauma. You can't co-opt it. But that doesn't mean you still can't talk about game-based learning and things that are playful and helping students make sense of some very difficult things. This is an example in my English class with Sylvia Plath, who wrote a number of great poems, but they deal with a lot of trauma. It's called confessional poetry. This poem is called Daddy, and it's a psychosexual poem where she finds herself mourning her lost father, but also grieving him and wishing he had died sooner because she likens him to a Nazi, and she feels that he may have abused her in her life. I don't want to make a game out of that. That's really, really heavy stuff for a lot of reasons. But I can still use playful learning to get students to engage in some really hard information here. So I'll give them a set of dice, and I'll say, okay, roll the dice, add up all the total of the dots that you have on those dice. And if you could, just circle the number of words that you have left on the dice. This is what we call blackout poetry. Circle the words you have left, black out everything else, reveal to me the main idea of this poem, just keeping that number of words that you think are most important based on the number of dice that you rolled. Oh, but there's a twist. Like a game, whatever you reveal in that circled words, now you have to illustrate that by what you black out. And I'll see examples here. This is a student, Jared. He wrote, I thought German was obscene, not pure. God brute, devil man. Back, back, back. I'm through. Killed 2, you bastard. Look at how he uses the Nazi imagery, the colors of the German flag, this symbol of Hitler and this oppression. There is nothing about this that I taught directly. This child walked away from my class and put this work in, not for a grade, but because they knew they would be competing with other students to see who could unlock that mystery, that sense of what's the real deep hidden meaning here. The second one comes from a student who wrote, I do kill you, my Polak friend, stuck like a Jew with a brute like you, you bastard. Notice they made it a maze, and it starts in a very, very dark place, and it has this gas imagery that sort of permeates it. It ends with the author dying by suicide right there by putting her head in an oven. That happened in real life. I did not teach that student any of this. This is the type of work that students start to do when they're unlocking mysteries rather than being told. And both of the students, in their own way, have demonstrated clear understanding of the main purposes of what this poem's about. This third one from Eliza is beautiful, and she went more artistic with it. But it's so obvious that even though they're all demonstrating their own learning in very, very divergent ways, each of them has a sense of oppression and suffocation, and each of them will have that powerful right-left brain hemisphere connection between this story, which was one-dimensional, has now been brought to life in this 3D understanding. You can do this with the Constitution. You can do this with a page of the textbook, with a photocopy, with a page of a novel. And it really helps students start to bring out, like they did with those story cubes, their own retelling in their own words of main idea. Really, really powerful. Talking about autonomy, characters being selected is a very autonomous thing. So I'll have students make their own action figure cards or make their own like collectible toys. I found some templates online which helped me out with that. We were studying the Schuyler sisters and the story of Alexander Hamilton. And I said, all right, if you lived in the time of Hamilton, what sort of hero would you be? Would you be on Hamilton's side? Would you be on the Federalist side? Would you be on the Southern Democrat side? Let me know. Students got to illustrate themselves and create themselves. This student made himself one of the Schuyler brothers. His first name is Paul. He says he's an equal rights supporter, and he's a social media influencer. I noticed that he could draw, which really drew me to the picture. I teach in a private Catholic school in Northern Virginia, but I was most struck by this, which was really interesting because if I zoom in on it, in this private Northern Catholic school in Virginia, which is a very conservative area, the student felt comfortable through the game to create a player that had an element that he said contained a hydro flask with some dope stickers. I looked at those dope stickers very quickly and I realized this student, through the game, felt comfortable telling me, even in a private conservative Catholic school, that he was in fact LGBT. Why? Because the game doesn't care whether you're gay or straight. The game doesn't care whether you're rich or poor. If you played Pokemon, it doesn't care if you're black or white. It cares about how good you are at the game. And the game makes it comfortable for you to start to express yourself in ways that are like an avatar, so there's no judgment there. How much more can I help this student and support the student individually because I know these things about the student individually, and that would have otherwise gone totally unnoticed, but it now lets the student see himself in our classroom, and I can lean in and ask those sorts of questions to really help bring him in going forward. I think autonomy is really, really powerful. I want to talk about mastery and purpose too. So let's talk about mastery. I talk about theme parks, mud runs, and escape rooms in my book. I run those crazy, stupid Spartan races, the Tough Mudders, and this is me on a better day with less facial hair. But I look like a monster, even though I'm really hurting. And I think that beauty in these things is that it presents these extreme challenges, which is always like a dangling carrot of, you know, that mastery is an illusion. You're never going to get there because the games will always get harder. But you want to keep pushing yourself further and further and further. There's a lot of research science about why that works. Great book by a woman named Sarah Lewis called The Rise, which is about creativity, the gift of failure, and the search for mastery. She's a writer out of Harvard. And they did research about Olympic athletes after the 1992 Summer Olympics. And what they found, which was, for me, was jaw-dropping, is that the difference between gold, silver, and bronze medalists is a negligible talent in most cases. We're talking about like the flutter or an eyelash or a fingertip difference between winners, second place, and third place. Interestingly, however, silver medalists have a very different reaction on the platform than gold and bronze. Bronze medalists often are just so thankful that they made the platform, they're elated to be up there. Gold medalists, they're like, hey, I did it, we're good. But the silver medalist almost universally looks like Michaela Maroney with this if only face, that near win, that moment of, damn it, if I just had one more swing of that bat. This is what we find out through research in gambling, the same reason why addiction profiles exist, because people believe that they had one more spin of that wheel or one more roll of those dice, then they would have won. And they want to play again, they want to get back to it again. So my goal every day in my classroom is to have most of my kids looking like Michaela Maroney when they walk out, like, I was just so close. I want one more swing of the bat. Because they found, interestingly, gold medalists and silver medalists, even though there's no real difference between their skill set, silver medalists go on to medal at much higher rates again and again and again because they're motivated by that if only. They say Tom Brady was the 199th drafted overall, and he spends his entire lifetime with a chip on his shoulder trying to prove that he deserves to be the best. So every week then I'll send out a newsletter to parents. In that newsletter, I'll put the game score not grades, just like which team is doing the best in a sort of newsletter that feels like a comic book. Every Friday, there's a new issue coming out. Here's how the teams are doing. Here's the team that's racing ahead, the team that did the best work products, samples, examples, and energy, enthusiasm. I'll put that up on my Twitter. I'll put it up on our social media channels on YouTube. And students start to lean in. They're like, hey, can I be in this week's newsletter? I think what I did was really great work because. And more as the time progresses, more and more students lean in and start to show up because they know they're performing for an audience that's bigger than themselves. And I know individually that certain kids every now and again need a little bit of TLC. So I find a way to give them those attaboy or those attagirls to get them right back into that conversation. So they feel that sense of, hey, I think I can do it. There's an old Henry Ford quote that says, if you believe you can do it or believe you cannot do it, then you are right. So how many times in my classroom have I told my kids, hey, you're that close. I think you can get it, but you need to push it a little harder. It's not unlike the game Angry Birds. Have you ever played Angry Birds? You take the red bird or the blue bird and you spring them back and you spring them across and he knocks down a whole bunch of pigs on a tower. If you can do it in one shot, they give you 3 stars. If it takes you 2 shots, they give you 2 stars. If it takes you 3 shots, they'll only give you 1 star, but they let you move on to the next level. That sense of mastery is, okay, I did it. I probably could do it better, but I still reserve the right to move forward until, that is, you get to like level 20. Once you get to level 20, it says, in order to unlock level 20, you need at least 40 stars. If you don't have 40 stars, sorry, can't let you play, man. That sense of mastery is that dangling carrot out there that says, all right, I'm not ready for this, but I can go back and strengthen up and get back in here again. So could I turn my classroom into a game for independent work that feels like an Angry Birds style activity? I was like, I bet I could. In a moment, I was reading a book and I was watching Indiana Jones on TV. I was like, oh man, be like a treasure search or a golden treasure map. Wouldn't that be great if kids felt like they were breaking into like a forbidden jungle or like finding a hidden temple and trying to save the world? So could I turn a writing exercise, an essay writing exercise, which is the most boring thing I could think of, into a game? So I handed them all a treasure map. Spoiler, as educators, we would call this the rubric. And I'd say each explorer, spoiler, student, has been given a golden treasure map to navigate the twisting chambers of this timeless structure. We called it the search for the ORB, the ancient ORB, the ancient orb, or the ancient outside reading book. They could explore these chambers in any order that they wanted to. When they think they had the answer, they called me over to see how many jewels they collected in that piece or parcel of the chamber. So this is a writer's workshop, and I'll zoom in and show you an example of it. This is the worksheet that every student is given. It's their rubric. And they can work on starting their essay in class. When they think they have something worth checking, they call me over. Here, I'm going to go in here where it says here, topic sentence under body basics. Body paragraph begins with a clear topic sentence, establishing a central idea that will be supported. Kid comes over and says, Mr. Meehan, I think I got it. And I'll check that spot. They either get 1, 2, 3, or 4 stars, or 1, 2, 3, or 4 points, or 1, 2, or 3, or 4 jewels. Check it off the list. Nice work. If they get all 4, they're racing on to the next activity. If they get less than 4, they reserve the right to keep working on that if they want to, but these are micro checkpoints. And I'm replacing micro checkpoints and micro badging, or micro credentialing, with what otherwise would have been micromanagement. Now my kids check in as they want to. We write for 2 or 3 days in class, and they have access to me whenever they want. Come on up, let me see it. The average student, I might see them 5, 10, 15 times before the papers are turned in. Through the background, and this is just a PowerPoint, I put up a timer and playing Indiana Jones music in the background. Students are writing how many gemstones they're collecting in the background. So I can see here that Jonathan is killing it, has 13 gemstones, but Alex only has 2. So that when Alex comes in and checks in with me, I'll make sure to give him a little bit of that TLC and say, hey, Alex, you're doing a good job. We need to move forward, though, with X, Y, and Z, and give him small, specific, actionable feedback that he can move forward with. Meanwhile, Jonathan, who's outdistancing everyone else in the clan, I'll say, hey, John, you're doing a great job, but here's an advanced concept that I think that you're still missing. Now, maybe I'll pick something really obscure like dangling participles or gerund phrases, and he'll ask me, what are those? And I'm like, I don't know, man. You probably want to use Google, check that out. But next time you check in with me, I need to know that you understand what that is. So I know Jonathan's doing great work, but he's getting totally divergent feedback than Alex. And that's okay, just like that first day activity, because the goal is to slow everybody down and speed everybody up at the same time. Different students will learn in different ways on different days. And this is really, really powerful because they have their avatars as little magnets on the board. They're crossing off how many points they're getting. And before I even get their essays turned in, I know what I'm looking for from each student. And I can give that much more feedback and that much more strengthening before they turn anything in. Then when they get anything turned in at the tail end of it, ultimately, I still have to grade things. I'm in a traditional school that does traditional grades. On the left-hand side, I'll give my rubric. Here's how you did it, a 4 out of 5, a 3 out of 5, on so on and so forth. But because I don't hate my students, I give them this back with a hex grid on the side or an octo grid on the right-hand side, and ask them to chart on the right-hand side what I have drawn for them there on the left. So you'll start to see students putting visual representations for what they received from me in a written format. They then start to see that visual come to life, and they'll connect those dots. Like I said, because I don't hate them, I'll let them half grade their own assignment. I've given the first half of the grade on the left-hand side. The second half of the grade now comes from what they're able to do for me on the right. Now that they have this visual, I ask them 3 questions. Question 1, which obstacle right now are you doing a fantastic job with? Which of these 8 areas are you killing it? And they answer it, oh, I think I'm doing a really good job with this sentence structure. And they explain for 2 or 3 sentences how they did or why they did that. Question 2, well, which obstacle is giving you the hardest problem right now? Well, I'm having trouble with body paragraphs, and the reason is boom, 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 boom. This is not Bart Simpson on the board. I will not throw spitballs at the teacher. Rather, individually, a student is saying, here's what I individually am succeeding in, and here's where I'm struggling. And then question 3 is, okay, so what can I do to help individually make you stronger or make you better? They turn that into me, and I know for next time what they are looking for and what I am seeing. We take that same paper the next time through and the same 8 skills looked for in the next essay. They then get it back and they chart it in a different color. And now we're talking about things like Carol Dweck and mindset, right? Students can start to see growth or signs of success, signs of progress, talk about mastery incrementally, even those small things. Hey, I'm making a difference. It's not Mr. Meehan hates me and that's why I have an 80. Rather, a child says, oh, I used to have a level 1. I'm starting to see level 2 work. And I could take the same information and pass it on to next year's teacher and say, hey, Billy's sentence structure is emerging. He's still struggling with body paragraphs. This is so much better than he understood The Great Gatsby, but he failed on the Scarlet Letter. Because the books are going to change every day, but those skills, those ultimate transfer skills, that's what we want to see students moving forward with. I talked about autonomy and mastery. I want to close with a conversation quickly about purpose. In my class, it's an English class, a full year of American literature. Well, it's a lot of things to discover. I talk about chasing for the American dream, reading, writing, speaking, and presentation. And all year long, digging into these stories of people like a football, who has the dream, who's losing the dream, because all year long, for 400 years, it's a thread that pulls in their imagination and helps them interact in their own way. We finished the year with a read of a William Faulkner novel called As I Lay Dying. And it tells the story of a very poor family in the 1920s who lives in a very poor town in Mississippi, and their mother is passing away. Spoiler, at the end of the novel, not everyone in the family grieves her in the same way. It doesn't go well. And the main character ends up committed to a mental institution as a result of the way that he mourns the loss of his mother. We also come to find out that he's a veteran with PTSD after World War I. There's a lot of darkness and a lot of heaviness to this. We also read it in the month of May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month. And if there's a purpose to anything, this whole thing has been building to, okay, well, we read smaller traumas. We read stories like Huckleberry Finn, or stories like Their Eyes Are Watching God, or stories like Scarlet Letter or Hamilton. But now we're building to these really heavy, again, things about psychosexual trauma. That's really, really difficult. It would be inappropriate to make a game out of that. But because this is the month of May, every student as they come into class takes this same game-based mentality towards very heavy texts and starts to understand how they would interact as if we were making, not quote, a game, but a playful approach to making sense of some very heavy topics. How? If you walked into Johnson & Johnson or you walked into Pfizer, you came in, you'd have to scan your credentials and your card as you walked in the door. Instead, my students come in and they scan this QR code every day, and that's where their warm-up is waiting, just like they're scanning in or scrubbing into the hospital to learn more about this time and place. Then they break into teams, and instead of competing for gold, silver, and bronze medals, which would be very inappropriate in a story about all of these heavy things, about abuse and trauma, they are divided into research teams, and they are competing to make sense of these confidential patient documents, spoiler, chapters out of the book, to become the research fellowship that would run the treatment plan as best is available based on what the research is showing. So then the gold medal team becomes the director, the second place becomes the fellow, the third place is the resident, and the fourth place is the intern. And they're competing to make the strongest suggestions, again, making arguments about why what they're reading needs to be processed in this way versus that way. So again, it's a slight palette swap or a new coat of paint on something, but it's the same game-based or team-based mentality. Doesn't mean we have to do fun and games like Legos, though that is a possibility. We can dive into really dark things, heavy things. In this case, they would scan this code and learn about the history of asylums in the 19-teens and 1920s. A little bit of background reading. I'll give them 5 to 10 minutes. They'll use the open internet to learn as much as they can about the time and place in which this novel is set. And then I'll say, okay, which team can make the strongest presentation of what are we learning about this type of treatment that was available in this? Because it really helps us understand the world of these characters, the fears, the concerns, the traumas that they're processing through. Things like the transorbital lobotomies or the asylum era in the 1920s. Talking about the American dream, how did this dream go from a place where everyone had it available to everyone, and now we're literally locking human beings up in these dark, scary places as we close out the 19th and into the 20th century. As we finish the year, I talk about this idea of the American dream, and all year long about purpose. We started our year off chasing the American dream, and I talked about jumping into the game, or how much would you pay to play this game. Now, students finish the year with a class trip to the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, which is located about 4 hours from our school as a class field trip. We go on this field trip to this abandoned mental hospital that was built in 1864 for 200 residents over its 600 acres. By the time it was forcibly closed by the United States government in 1994, the same physical space had over 2,000 residents. And students are now tasked with, how do we learn from history so that we never replicate these same horrific things again? And again, that's using some playful way to get into it, seeing things, doing things, creating things, because it starts to make them feel like they are agents for change rather than just passive receivers of awfulness. We also bring 2 licensed counselors. The man in the hoodie here is my principal, to make sure that students who have questions about these things have access to all of the resources necessary to help them make sense as young people in the world about how to make a difference. From the first day of our gamified syllabus to the last day of our final exam, rather than a book or a test or a essay that they have to write, I have all students now create me a website with 5 pages. On page 1, they create a historically appropriate asylum that would have been used to commit one of the characters we've encountered in American literature. Maybe that's time appropriate for Huckleberry Finn, or for Hester Prynne of the Scarlet Letter, or Janie from Their Eyes Are Watching God, or someone else that we've seen through the Harlem Renaissance, or someone else from like the Sylvia Plath type poetry. Once they told me what the amenities would look like, because that's how those people used to get locked up back in the day, now they're writing a second page with creative writing where they're speaking on behalf of that person. What are they feeling? How are they empathizing with these people when they're asked to go to these awful, awful places? And why would this person in that time and place have been committed, even though they've done nothing wrong, right? Talking about things like being locked up for being a woman or locked up for being LGBT. And then as they're writing on second and third pages, they're doing research with the DSM-5, and we're Catholic schools, so we use the Catechism of the Catholic Church, about contemporary alternative treatment options so that we never replicate these same things again. So now again, we become heroes to save people and not bystanders who watch as people are witness to awful, awful things. On the final days of class, then on the final page of the website, they post a reflection. So what did you learn from this class? What did you learn from this unit? What did you learn from this assignment? And I am consistently moved to tears by the type of things I see. I see students who come out and say, hey, I'm going to get involved with, and then they go on to college and they study things like psychology, or they go into law and medicine, because they're so fired up to fix these injustices. They start to see themselves as agents for change, and they realize the purpose of what this English class was. It's not just old dead white guys in a parade of old books that no one's ever read. It's seeing themselves as characters who can continue making this dream more affordable to all people. And I tell my students again and again, the only thing more powerful than content ownership is content authorship. It's not, hey, I made this for you, please give it back to me. Rather, it's, you helped me co-create this. You've metacognited through every step of the way. I'm so proud of you. I can't wait to see what you're going to do next. This class is fundamentally different because you showed up. And I use these templates and I use this game-based approach to really help my students start to see themselves in the classroom, because when they start to believe they can, let's find out what they start to do. So I do want to respect your time. I will take questions, but I want to keep this slide up very quickly before I take the questions. All of the templates available from today are available on my website at www.EDrenalineRush.com. That's adrenaline with E, like educational adrenaline. I'm on Twitter at Meehan, EDU. If you like what you're hearing, you want to hang out more. I also do a podcast every week called Talk to Me in the Car, which is all about teacher tips for education. Totally free, about 10 to 15 minutes, and I literally record it in my car on my drive to and from work as a high school instructional coach. I have a hashtag Adrenaline. You want to see other examples on the internet. And I have a book, Adrenaline Rush. I do presentations at schools and things like that. If today sounded awesome and you want to hang out and talk further about that, that's amazing. If you are so kind as to take the survey at the very, very end, that would be great. But I'm happy to pause and ask questions and answer questions for the next 10, 15 minutes, whatever you need. But I'm going to stop sharing the screen now. I want to say thanks from the bottom of my heart. Like I said, we don't do this to make money. We do it to make a difference. And I hope I'm helping you make a difference in your classes. But I'm here to help if I can. So thanks. And I'll take questions now. Hit this one and then go to that one. All right, let's see here. All right. Alicia joked that she's not as bad at games as she thought. That's hilarious. Karen commented too about the controllers being very, very difficult. Copilot, that's a great way to learn about it here. Yoshi all day, Dave says. Green Yoshi or blue Yoshi? I use white Yoshi. NGSS Storylines for Science sounds exactly like your Lone Star stories. Yes, for sure. The stories really can be pulled in and borrowed from any course, any content area, any state standards, for sure. I was working with an English teacher, or a math teacher, and she created a story where it was year-long fighting against Negatron with an N, like Megatron, Negatron. And it was a monster who was stealing the shards of light in a time capsule. SOL is actually the standards of learning, which is what Virginia calls its standardized test. So I think that that's a really cool example of a way to use a little bit of creativity to lean back in on that. Ed joined the meeting. Reminds me of that Slides Mania template. Yes, Slides Mania is amazing for sure, and her stuff is fantastic. It's also always free, so please feel free to use that stuff. It's great. Patsy says she loves Indiana Jones. Cheryl, thank you for the presentation note. Patsy, thank you also for the kind notes that you guys are all sending here on the left-hand side. I'm just trying to make sure I'm responding to anybody who had any questions. I'm happy to take any questions. Dave, I'm looking forward over the summer. Keeps you motivated to do the best for students always. 100%, man. And I love it because I ask my kids what they care about. And I can make a Fortnite themed game, even though I know nothing about Fortnite, just by doing a little bit of listening. Because isn't Monopoly the same game as Candyland, right? Move a piece around a board. With a little bit of a change, you can get into the things that the kids are really interested in. I think Fortnite is not so different than James Bond or Halo. Back when I was a kid, we played James Bond. If I can learn from the kids, okay, yeah, I can use those same strategies, things like that. So that's great. And I said, thanks for sharing 100%. Robin said, thanks. Oh, 100%, Robin, thank you. And please message me on Twitter. James said, how can I adapt this to elementary students, junior level students, grades 4 through 6? Yeah, great question. So James, if you head to my website, EDrenalineRush.com, I had last summer, I was doing a thing called Open Source Template Tuesday, where I was just turning the mic over to anybody in the world who had adapted my templates. And they were talking about ways that they've scaled up or scaled down some of the difficulties. Because I give presentations for like game-based learning, really dork stuff. But I've also done in the same week, like literally the same 24-hour period, I give a presentation in Baltimore for the game-based learning conference. And I flew to Portland, Oregon, and gave a presentation at the Council for Exceptional Children, which is students who have severe intellectual or cognitive delay. So the idea that games have very clear rules is great, because students who are on the spectrum or students who may not be on level do a really good job at learning, oh, this game is hard. It's not that the teacher is mean, it's that this level is more challenging. So building in those scaffolds and those sort of checklists to help them through it, maybe the Flipgrid station, using a Microsoft example, instead of filming for me a 2-minute video where you X, Y, and Z, maybe it's, hey, just give me a 15-second or 30-second video where you're able to A, B, and C. And I hope that really helps. But there's plenty of other examples on my website. Just check out the Open Source Template Tuesday. And I'm very, very happy to share any of that stuff here too. Oh, Stacy, you're here. Thank you. I appreciate it. That's super awesome. I did not know that you'd be here. And that's Sharon. Thank you. Thank you. Jeff, I appreciate it too. Anna asked a question. How long does it take you to plan a gamified classroom for a whole school year? That's a great question, Anna. I tell people it took me about 38 years and 2 weeks because I'll be 38 in November. But I joke about that to say, look, this is the product of the things that I came up playing in my life as a kid. So I just started rethinking my lesson planning as if it was game planning. And if I'm thinking about a unit, okay, it's an annotation unit. Well, they can annotate with Legos or with story cubes or with sketch notes or with a teacher talk or a Flipgrid, whatever it is. Well, then that idea sits out there. And now I have like 2 to 3 weeks worth of class that I don't have to think about nightly lesson planning. I just let people interact over the course of that next 8 classes with that. So I unit plan, but I don't lesson plan anymore because every day will be totally different based on what the kids are up to. And I'm comparing and contrasting about what students are turning in. And then while I'm working that daily activity, that energy with those students, I'm like, okay, here's what I'm seeing. I should mix up the teams for next time because this one will be a writing unit or something like that. And that's why I provide those things online for free, because an Indiana Jones thing could just as easily be a space race, right? It's a quick change of a pivot or a new coat of paint, but it's the same pedagogy. Likewise, the next novel, okay, it's not the Scarlet Letter in the woods, it's Jay Gatsby, and now we're in the Clue Mansion. And just like that, it's pretty much the same activity. So that can be really helpful. So please feel free to steal it and use it. Karen says, Minecraft. Minecraft is great, 100%. Never seen a junior high school classroom so quiet. Gamification works. I completely agree. If you check out my YouTube channel, I have an example of a student who made Dante's Inferno as if it was a walkthrough of an amusement park. They made a carnival. They made like the characters who were walking through. They made a log flume ride through fire. They really geeked out about that stuff. And Legos are great for the physical, tactile. But at the time of COVID, hey guys, work on Minecraft is a great one. Tara Linney, who's an amazing educator, will be doing a session with Q, Microsoft, later on today about using Minecraft in the classroom. So that's an awesome tool if you have it, if you need it. Patsy said on the website, oh, thank you, I appreciate it. KD, how often do I have students doing individual work for group work? And yes, if you need to leave, please feel free. I won't be offended, I promise. Individual work versus group work. Most of my stuff is in groups and teams. I call my class Montessori school on steroids a little bit. Students are working together, playing together, learning together, and then casually competing against one another. It's a giant collaboration, if that makes sense. Like a competition, collaboration. And I find the students love it. Though I will break like 2 or 3 times in the year for maybe the total of maybe 8 or 9 weeks worth of individual things, because I do want to practice that writing skills, and that is an individual thing. But there's a lot of peer review in the writing too. I try wherever possible to let those teams start to learn together, and to do that 3 before meeting where they ask each other rather than asking me as the teacher, because that can be really helpful. Students become really empowered to learn off of one another rather than learn from me, and they learn by teaching it, which is really, really cool. Alicia says, I mentioned having kids call me over, come up. What are my class sizes like? Find it hard to manage classes of 25 or 30 if kids are all calling me over at the same time. Yeah, great question, Alicia. So in my public school where I started, I had classes of 42 and only desks were 35. So it actually was born of a necessity. I started putting kids in groups because I couldn't answer 42 questions at once. I could, however, answer 6 teams worth of questions just by giving different types of problems to each of those 6. And what I like about the game-based or the team-based model is the team checks in with one another before they check in with me. I'll often build in like a thing like an NFL coach will have like a challenge flag. And as a team, they'll only get 2 challenge flags per class or something like that. So if they hit that panic button, they need me, I'll gladly come over and help them. But they're forced to trade in that challenge flag. Mr. Meehan, what do I have to do here? And it's like, before you ask it, are you sure that you want to ask me it? And what I find is they don't want to waste that flag, even though there's no harm in losing it, right? You can't take it with you when you go. But I find that they will help each other out because it's a scarcity. And they're like, whoa, no, we should save this for a really good question. I'll literally hand them a piece of paper, and the questions used to be, what do I do with this? I was like, well, start by reading, right? But now they'll actually read it because they don't want to waste that flag, especially as they're held together as a team, which is really, really helpful. Anita Waters says, I want to use this with teachers to encourage professional development. Yeah, let's go. Shoot me a text message or shoot me a Vox or an email. I do school-based visits too, if that's the thing you're interested in too. I hope it's helpful for teachers. Like I said, any grade, any content area, just shoot me a message. I'm very happy to help out with that. Angela, looking forward to checking out my website, my book. Thank you, Angela. I appreciate it. That sounds amazing. And let me know how I can help. My whole contact information there. Shoot me a tweet. Let's hang out. Dave says, Negatron sounds awesome. I'm always looking at a way to theme my math class. It doesn't just throw math in a completely separate theme. 100%, brother. And I love the idea that Negatron and like these evil minions, like the negatives or the irrationals, right? There's so many things about math. Math is, I talk about the OG of gamification, problem-based, project-based learning, right? It's the stopping distance, or it's the smoke off of a train going in one direction or another. Like, we have the power to tell so many rich stories that are not just, oh, and by the way, there's math on the side. The only math I ever seemed to get as a problem was, or a project was, teachers would tell me, well, when you're buying carpet or when you're buying tile for your house. And I was like, I don't think that that's the most applicable version of, but what if you use it for social justice? Hey, we have to terraform this new land so that we can make it available for the most people. What does that access look like? There's so many things you can lean into about real world efficacy, and students can start to see, hey, if math really is a thing that we're supposed to use every single day, how can we lean into these projects, these stories? And the beauty is you tell your own story, so you pull in the things that make most sense for you. Jen says, hey, thanks. Digital escape rooms are so much fun. Yes, I have examples of, that's a very low prep thing. You just make a Microsoft form or a Google form, and people can answer the questions. If they get it right, they move forward in the escape room. If they get it wrong, they're bounced backward or things like that. It's an awesome, very very easy way to sort of dip your toes into the waters. And I have some examples on my website. In fact, I have a pandemic themed one under distance learning where if you take the pandemic themed game as a teacher, like on the third or fourth page, it says, hey, are you a teacher? Do you want a copy of this? Hit the save button and it saves a copy for you. So you can just use that and paint it any way you like for your students as well. Kara says, cool, let's check it out. Amazing. Laura says, do I ever do whole group instruction or are students looking things up on their own? Zero whole group instruction, Laura. I will do Socratic seminars where I'll bring the students together maybe once every 2 weeks or so. We'll just dialogue because that's very equitable. But I am every bit as much a learner in those circles as a teacher. And sometimes what I'll do at the end of every unit, not sometimes, but I will do at the end of every unit, is I'll do player feedback surveys, and they'll be able to tell me how their learning is working for them. They'll do a lot of metacogniting. Students are grading themselves, which is amazing. Like, they're telling me, hey, I'm not doing great on this. I'm struggling on that thing. I could do better on this. I think if I applied myself more. And it removes that thing about teaching that I don't like, which is to be the guy who yells, the guy who like assigns, the guy who makes, and instead I become, there's a great book. It's called Teaching as the Art of Staging. And I'm blanking on the name of the author, but they say you move from sage on the stage through guide on the side and become the impresario with a scenario where it's like, hey guys, I'm the party host, but it's your party. Do what you got to do. And I think that that's really encouraging, and they do give me more. And I'm finding it works. And I'm working with students who are on the spectrum. I find that students who are on the spectrum do incredibly well in a class like this because it gives them the chance to understand clear feedback and rules. And they get so much feedback from me, so much coaching. It really does bring them into the conversation rather than being, I'm the bad guy who's always throwing more stuff at them. And I hope that makes sense. I want to respect everybody's time. I do know we're right up against it. I'm 15 minutes out. I will absolutely hang out one-on-one. You can shoot me a tweet on the Twitter machine. I'll put my website here one more time in case you need it. EDrenalineRush.com. If you like what you heard today, please say nice things to Microsoft so they welcome me back. And you can tell friends and stuff. My website is there. I have my Twitter. Thanks, Katie. I really appreciate it, man. Ma'am, I'm sorry. And I appreciate the time that you guys are putting in. Like I said, we don't do this to make money. We do it because we make a difference, and hopefully this is a thing that can make a difference in your classrooms. I will turn off the recording now so we can go officially off the record. If you need anything, I'm here for you, though, for sure. I will push this button, and I wanted to say thank you for all that you're doing in your classrooms. Anything I can do to help, I'm all in. God bless you.
Are we getting it emailed to us, or is it?